Alright. I've been thinking about Hitman related stuff as I tend to do too much, and I figured I'd share some of those thoughts. So this video is just a collection of random ideas I wanted to throw out there to anyone else interested. The first thing on the list is the rating system, and since that's something that's getting changed for Hitman 2 anyway, bringing it up might be a bit redundant, but I'd still like to at least mention why I think having a good rating system is important and what I think makes a good rating system. I think the two most important aspects of a good rating system are clarity and flexibility. Flexibility is especially important to motivate new players to try and improve their skills. When after the mission the game reminds you of the 10 witnesses and 5 extra bodies you left behind and rates you as a gangster, you might just get a feeling that you can do better than that and try again. Season 1's system doesn't accomplish this at all, as it is completely binary, and shooting even one known target in front of another instantly drops the rating from 5 stars to 1 star. With a rating system that strict, it's hard to get a feeling that you're improving at all when the game keeps telling you that you suck. Blood Money, on the other hand, did a very good job at this, since each mistake only lowered the rating by a small bit and the list of ratings covered everything from Silent Assassin to Psychopath. On the other end of the scale, the system could also be used to raise the skill ceiling beyond just getting Silent Assassin. The requirements of Silent Assassin themselves shouldn't be overly strict to avoid going for it becoming just tedious instead of challenging. Alekhine's gun, for example, went too far with this, and the best rating in that game requires the player to kill all targets using accidents and still hide the bodies, which I find completely ridiculous. Instead of making Silent Assassin harder to get, I'd like to use some sort of badge system that rewards more challenging playstyles and is not necessarily related to the ratings themselves. For example, a special badge could be shown next to the rating if the player completed the mission without using disguises or knockouts, just as a simple bonus. And if all the targets were killed with the same weapon, that weapon could be shown as a badge as well. The second thing, clarity, is needed so the final rating doesn't come as a surprise to the player and they understand how the rating is calculated. The problem is that Hitman is a pretty complex game, and communicating why poisoning a target makes the body undiscoverable or how NPCs can notice crimes without noticing 47 is not an easy thing to do. Personally, I think being able to see the rating in real time on the HUD, like in Absolution, would help a lot. Of course, the system also needs to be based on some common sense, and for example, Absolution had 4 possible max ratings depending on the map, and I couldn't put the possible ratings in order from best to worst if I tried, because they're all so similar. Even with the real-time rating tracking that the game had, that system had no chance of making much sense. In Season 1, some of the HUD notifications appeared way too slowly or gave misleading information that seemed like it would be related to the rating but wasn't, like the unnoticed witness notification that appears when knocking someone out from the front with a melee weapon. As a result, the HUD was pretty unhelpful for understanding the rating system. Hitman 2's HUD might be a bit better with the picture-in-picture system, but so far I'm not overly optimistic since at least the unconscious witness notification is still there. But hopefully the HUD score setting that was in the pre-beta options menu is something designed to track the rating, as that would be a huge improvement. Moving on to Elusive Targets, the game mode that is super exciting because you only get one chance, and that a lot of people hate because you only get one chance. Here's what I do with them to try to keep them exciting while getting the most value out of them. Keep looping them on a regular basis indefinitely, and allow anyone to play them once per loop. Since there are 20 to 30 targets, it means you only have a chance to kill each one once every 6 months or so, which keeps it exciting, but doesn't drive away people who don't like the timed targets. And it means the mode won't be completely obsolete to players who have killed each target once. But yeah, I'm mostly bringing this up because I'm getting pretty tired of 1, seeing people complain about having to plan their life around the game, and 2, starting up the game myself and seeing a picture of some completed elusive target that's just there to remind me of the game mode that I won't be playing for a long time since I killed them all already. As for the designs themselves, I'd love to see more experimental targets. Since they're not the main focus of the game, they could be used to just try out weird shit and see what works. Most Season 1 targets only stood out because of their writing, but mechanically they didn't really offer much new. Sometimes you had objectives like not harming some specific NPC or stealing some item, but the only ones that really stood out to me were the Twin and the Fugitive, where figuring out the target's identity was a big part of the mission. Gary Busey also felt like a missed opportunity, as in his intro he says,
"You'll never find me! I have the power of invisibility!"
Yet he does nothing like that in the mission itself. In an elusive target, I'd be more than okay with something crazy like the target sometimes turning invisible. Also, just as a small extra thing, maybe include a note of what weapon was used to take down each target in the list of past targets. Just a small thing that might encourage people to go for something a bit more interesting than the most obvious accident kill. Next up is another game mode, Escalations. I got physically assaulted at Gamescom for what I've said about the Escalations in the past, so I'll start with something positive. The Patient Zero Escalations were a big step in the right direction. Objectives like shooting trespassers as a cowboy or popping balloons as a clown make for much more interesting and memorable escalations than killing some random dude with some random weapon within a time limit. Dumb challenges, mixed with unique themes, that's just perfect for the game mode, especially when the two complement one another. Having some sort of core idea that ties the escalation together and just going absolutely nuts with it is what I would like to see more, and the newer escalations are very much on the right track. Then the negative stuff. I still think the core idea of the escalation game mode is deeply flawed. Maybe IO has some data that says otherwise, but the impression I have is that people don't like doing the repetitive lower levels of each escalation to get to the final level where you have the full set of objectives. So, as an alternative, here's my rudimentary idea for a similar game mode that could be based on the highest levels of escalations. Feel free to poke it full of holes. Say you have a mission where your goal is to kill 3 targets with the battle axe while wearing your suit without ever climbing, and you also need to get Silent Assassin. That's a lot of objectives, and some are more difficult than others. So let's give each of those objectives a point value that adds up to X. Complete the objective, get the points, simple enough. The mission completion wouldn't be tied to any single objective, but instead you'd have to collect, say, 80% of the possible points. That would make the mission more open-ended, as players could, for example, choose to ignore the objective that prevents you from climbing, and instead get the points by going for Silent Assassin. Could maybe even implement a medal system where bronze medal only requires 60% of total points and platinum 100%. Does this make any sense? No? Great, moving on. Let's talk about footstep sounds. This is really just a minor mechanical thing, but I want to throw it out there. Currently in Season 1 on normal mode, the NPCs don't react to 47's running footsteps in any way, and on Pro only Enforcers react, and even they don't care much if 47 is crouching. Since Enforcers are based on disguise, it doesn't make much sense that they react to your sound depending on what you're wearing. It just doesn't make much logical sense. Logically, it makes the most sense that either everyone reacts always or no one reacts ever, but I don't think either of those options make for very good gameplay. Instead of any of those systems, I think the best compromise is to have NPCs react to 47's footsteps if 47 is trespassing. Hitman has 2 types of stealth, the social hiding in a plain sight type, and the more traditional hiding out of sight type, and whether 47 is trespassing or not is what I think separates the two. If you're trying to just blend in, there should be no reason to worry about footsteps, but if you're trying to remain completely hidden, it makes sense to avoid making any noise at all. Seems logical enough to me. As for different ways of moving, I don't think 47's stance should affect the sound level, as you already have an incentive to stay crouched in order to be less visible, and honestly I doubt the sound levels would be really that different. Movement speed, however, should make a difference, as it, at least to me, makes more sense logically that running makes more noise than walking, and it also works better for the gameplay. When going through a room, should I walk and risk getting caught because I'll be spending a long time in the room, or should I run and take the risk of somebody hearing me and spotting me because of that? Finally, I want to talk about randomness in Hitman. Ever since I made the video about how much I dislike enemies turning their heads randomly and spotting you, I've been hearing high quality counter-arguments like, "Get good," or "It's realistic," and so on. Here's the thing. I really like planning the hits, and I think that's also the thing Hitman does the best. I want to be able to figure out exactly when a hallway is clear and when to set off distractions, and just generally plan every little detail until I have a complete plan that just works. assuming I execute it correctly. But when the moment-to-moment gameplay has noticeable random elements to it, like the random head turning, the focus shifts away from coming up with a perfect plan and skillfully executing it, and towards constantly adjusting to things you have no control of, and I don't find that nearly as rewarding. I know a lot of people say it's necessary to have some randomness so you can't just repeat the same hit over and over, and I don't think that's a good reason. In many cases I would agree, but in case of Hitman specifically, the game throws so many options at you that I think it should be up to the player to change their plan and try different approaches, rather than to expect the game to constantly mix things up. That's the whole beauty of Hitman's replayability. Of course there are some cases where the experience will always end up being random, like how a group of NPCs reacts to an explosion or how a coin bounces when thrown, but I do think that this type of randomness should be cut to the minimum whenever possible. That said, not all randomness is bad. For example, in the murder of Kraus from Blood Money, there are 3 possible locations where one of the targets can be in. But since that was one major thing rather than a ton of small things all over the place, it was plausible to take that into account and plan around needing to figure out where the target is, or just assume the target's location and build the plan around that specific scenario. In a way, that random element actually enhanced the planning aspect by offering multiple areas to plan around. But yeah, I guess that's all I have for now. So, thanks for watching, leave a comment, so on.